Welcome to another one of Parkinson's Concierge Fireside Chat. With us today, we are delighted to have as a guest in our consultant room, Nick Zarotti. Nick, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Can you tell a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. So I was born and raised in Italy. I studied psychology there, and then I moved to the UK around 7 years ago in 2013 to do my PhD at Lancaster University. And I've always had an interest in psychology related to neurological conditions and neurodegenerative conditions. So my PhD was on Huntington's disease, which is another motor neurodegenerative condition like Parkinson's. And then I went on to do a few postdocs on a postdoc on motor neuron disease at the University of Sheffield, and I'm currently training in clinical psychology at the University of East Anglia. But I'm also continuing my research activity on motor neurodegenerative conditions, now carrying out projects on Parkinson's disease.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Well, it sounds like you've been busy and you've got a good head start in your future chosen career. And on behalf of somebody who has a neurodegenerative condition, thank you very much for dedicating your time and energy to the great work and the research that you do. What is it you're trying to achieve with Minds and Movement, if I may ask?
So yeah, Minds and Movement is one of the projects I've been working on since I finished my PhD. It's a project in collaboration between Lancaster University and the British Psychological Society. And our aim is to create the first UK national guidance for psychological interventions for people with motor neurodegenerative conditions, in particular for motor neurodegenerative conditions, which are Parkinson's, Huntington's, motor neuron disease, and multiple sclerosis. The project is actually at the very end at the moment. We are really hoping to publish the guidance, if not by the end of January, in early February. So it will be out momentarily. And what we realized by working on it is that generally speaking, neurodegenerative conditions, as we already sort of knew, don't really get a lot of attention when it comes to psychological interventions, psychological features, because there is a very strong focus, understandably, on the medical side of things, on neurological symptoms, on medications, and and when it comes to research, there's a lot of input in trying to find a cure, again, very understandably. But what people tend to underestimate maybe at times is the fact that quality of life, day-to-day quality of life, is also very important, and being very long-term conditions, at least for most of them, apart from unfortunately motor neuron disease, which is a much quicker trajectory, but Parkinson's and Huntington's, multiple sclerosis stay with a person who is affected for many, many years and affect the daily life of that person for many, many years.
Absolutely.
So obviously, finding a cure is very important, but finding a way to improve quality of life on a daily basis is also essential, because that person still has to live with a condition for sometimes the better part of their life. So we were trying to find what is out there in terms of indications for psychological interventions for people with these conditions. And we found a staggering difference, I have to say, across conditions. So multiple sclerosis, unsurprisingly in a way, is the one that has the most evidence-based. That is probably due to the fact that it's fairly common in terms of prevalence, but also affects younger people. So people tend to be diagnosed in their 20s, in their early 20s, and they have to go through, well, they have to live with the condition for the better part of their life. So it's
Yeah.
It's something that receives a lot of research attention, also from a psychological perspective. Parkinson's is the second that we found to receive a lot of attention. There is quite a bit around that. There is some evidence. We recently published a review on psychological interventions for people with Parkinson's based on the data that we found for the guidance. What we found is that there are a few therapies like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, that can be used for certain aspects of Parkinson's, for example, insomnia, for anxiety, but the evidence is still, despite the fact that it's fairly more studied than other conditions, it's still quite inconclusive for many symptoms, for many parts of the psychological difficulties that affect people with Parkinson's, like depression, like apathy, psychosis. There's nothing on psychosis for people with Parkinson's in terms of psychological interventions. It tends to be managed just with antipsychotics, with psychiatric medication. So there is much more room for improvement. And for other conditions like motor neuron disease and Huntington's disease, there is little to no evidence. And I think that that's something that tells us a lot about awareness, and this links nicely to the great work that I think the Parkinson's community is doing to increase awareness. And I think the Parkinson's community should be seen as a role model, really. When it comes to Parkinson's, there's a lot of variance in terms of when people get diagnosed. Obviously, if you get young onset Parkinson's, it's going to affect you for much longer in your life than compared to if you get diagnosed when you're 70.
That's right. That's right. It has a lot of facets amongst that as well, because I was diagnosed at the age of 40. I was self-employed, so I had work. I had a mortgage, like many other people. I was what I believed to be in the midst of my life or my career. And then to find along comes Mr. Parkinson's with all of its side effects and symptoms. Not only coming to terms with the fact that you've got Parkinson's, but quite often a lot of the symptoms tend to be more prevalent than the Parkinson's.
No, absolutely. But as I said, I think that the Parkinson's community is doing an amazing job at increasing awareness. And in a way, I think that, for example, when it comes to Huntington's or motor neuron disease is a bit peculiar in that sense, because there is little evidence on psychological interventions, but I suspect that is mostly due to the fact that people with motor neuron disease motor neuron disease is also the name we use in the UK, more specifically for what in the rest of the world is also called amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. So what Stephen Hawking had, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, apart from Stephen Hawking, that he was an absolutely unique case. People really tend to, unfortunately, die within 3 to 5 years from the diagnosis. There is very little scope for psychological interventions from the diagnosis because people don't survive that long. A real advantage of the Parkinson's awareness campaign was having very famous patients advocating for it. Think of Michael J. Fox, a young onset Parkinson's.
Very much still in the limelight as well, and continue to fight the condition.
We had Muhammad Ali, we had Pope John Paul II, who had it. So there's a lot of very famous people who increase the awareness of the condition. The Parkinson's community can be used as a role model for other conditions as well, because it's absolutely amazing. The response, for example, that I've had for this study that I'm now running for my clinical training at the University of East Anglia, which is about medication adherence and how it can be influenced by mood and feelings of control. I'm now running this online survey, and the response that we had was amazing. We got over 100 participants in less than 3 days. Wow. And I never had such a huge response from any of the neurodegenerative disease communities. So the Parkinson's community is really trying to push research hard, is really keen. And for that reason, I think that whatever works for the Parkinson's community can then be used as a role model for other conditions as well.
Very good. That's fantastic to hear. And thank you very much for, mentioning your kind thoughts about the Parkinson's community, because the community itself does have some very, very hardworking, dedicated volunteer individuals. And they're advocating, and awareness that they produce for the condition is second to none. So, golden question. COVID-19. How have you found things with people's mental agility, the cognitive side, the anxiety?
Yeah.
There's been a massive explosion in people becoming anxious, frightened, scared, not knowing what to do.
Yeah.
And both Charlotte and I, right from the very start of COVID lockdown last year, reached out to a heck of a lot of people just to keep touch, to ask how they were doing and making sure that they were okay. Well,
COVID is obviously having an impact on all sorts of daily life aspects, not just obviously people with Parkinson's, all of us. The problem with people with Parkinson's and people with neurodegenerative conditions in general is that they can feel isolated already because of the condition. If you add COVID on top of that, the feeling of isolation can become very overwhelming. My group from Lancaster University, the one with whom I'm working for Minds and Movement, has recently carried out a survey of people with Parkinson's experiences of COVID that for Parkinson's UK, and that's it's been published on Parkinson's UK's website. And what we found exactly was, as you said, that the anxiety skyrocketed, the feelings of isolation skyrocketed, and there is a lot of work to do because the most vulnerable people in society in general tend to become forgotten when there is a crisis that involves everyone.
That's right. That's right.
So that's why we need to remember that COVID is not affecting just the people that since up until yesterday didn't really have any health concerns, but it's affecting the people who were struggling already with a lot of health concerns, a lot of psychological difficulties, and COVID is just making them worse. So hopefully we're now seeing the light at the end of the tunnel with the vaccination. I would absolutely recommend all the people with Parkinson's to get the vaccination done as soon as possible, as soon as they get the opportunity. That is going to be obviously very helpful in terms of building the herd immunity over time. We need to be realistic. It's very unlikely that life is going to be back to completely normal after everybody, or the vast majority of people have been vaccinated. And we have built herd immunity. As many virologists are saying, I think that we need to accept the fact that COVID is going to stay. It's a virus that at the end of the pandemic will become endemic in most regions of the world, just like the flu.
Yes.
But the fact that we have built a vaccine means that it will become much less dangerous. So we'll just learn to live with it and get on with our lives. It's a matter of trying to hold on for the time being, and this is what we have to try to support the more vulnerable people, like the people with Parkinson's, that have health concerns already, that might be isolated already. So it's a matter of trying to focus our attention, our efforts in this moment, and help the people that might be falling off the cracks of the system at this time. For example, not being able to see their consultants, not being able to access medications, not being able to to ask for help because they are isolated, etc.
Well, Charlotte and I have been involved in a lot of tech and testing of the tech for conditions mainly to do with Parkinson's. What we've found is there's a lot of talk about telehealth and telemedicine. And as it happens, at 2 o'clock today, I'm joining my consultant for a telephone consultation. With Parkinson's being predominantly an older generation condition, there's still a lot of people with Parkinson's who don't have mobile phones or tablets or PCs. They rely on their landline. Realistically, if I was to ask, if you were in pain and I was to ask you, how are you doing today? Chances are you would say, I'm okay.
Yeah.
Because you're dealing with it, where that particular aspect might be troublesome for a lot of other people. So it's immediately brought up. If things like their condition aren't brought up, I genuinely feel that people of the older Parkinson's, people within our community, may not take to telehealth or telemedicine quite as easily or readily. And that may be something that needs to be addressed before a full shift is proposed towards telehealth or telemedicine.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think there's also another aspect when it comes to older people, which is there's much, from a generational point of view, there's much more of a tendency to just react with a stiff upper lip with many things, especially when it comes to psychological difficulties. Older people might not have any concerns telling you that they have all sorts of physical issues. Like if they have back pain, they will tell you, I have back pain, or even though they might not complain about it, or they might not tell you that it's affecting their life massively. But it's rare to hear older people say, oh, you know, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling depressed, because that generation, in a way, has been taught that big boys don't cry, that you're not supposed to complain about psychological difficulties. You just have to get on with that and deal with it. So as a psychologist, from the perspective of a psychologist, one further barrier to get into reach and support these people during the pandemic is the fact that not only it's hard to reach them from a technological standpoint, but it's also hard to make sense of what their experiences are from a psychological perspective, because they might not be telling you what they're feeling. Now, I take your point about not being very tech savvy, and that's obviously another generational issue. Although many of the things that can be done over telemedicine in terms of, for example, using Zoom or video calls, etc., can normally be done over the phone as well. So unless you are doing something very specific, like a neurological examination over telemedicine, which can be done amazingly, but that's very technical, very specific. But if it's just a review of seeing how things are going, you know, trying to check in with someone, trying to review a medication, etc., that's something that can be done over the phone as well. And in my experience, the older people are more than happy to stay on the phone and talk about what their needs are. So in a way, that can be sort of worked around, I believe. Obviously, the more the more time passes, the more the needs and the means of people with Parkinson's will change. In 20, 30 years, the next generation of 60, 70-year-olds with Parkinson's will be tech savvy, will be able to do that. So medicine has to, well, healthcare in general, not just medicine, has to continuously adapt as patients change, because times change. So it's a continuous challenge, but it's an exciting one, I have to say.
It's an exciting era that we're entering, and providing it's carried forward at the right pace for everyone to join in, then it's gonna have a lot of benefits for a lot of people as we move forward. Who thought only 10, 15 years ago that, the device that you talk to when you're wandering around will one day have things in like accelerometers, compasses. So your smartphone nowadays, the computing power in one of those is phenomenal. It's incredible. It's incredible to think that.
It's incredible, and I think there is a lot of scope for wearable technology as well for motor neurodegenerative conditions, especially
Absolutely.
Parkinson's. So trying to counteract motor symptoms by using wearable or adaptive technology, for example, spoons for people who experience a lot of tremors, shaking that counteract the shaking so that they can actually feed themselves.
That's right, like a gyroscopic device in it.
It's the same principle we use for stabilizing cameras.
It is. That's one thing that Charlotte and I are very, very focused on, is helping people in the here and now. There's a lot of charities out there who exist purely to raise funds for research, and long may they do so, because research is key to the long-term goal of finding a cure. And we certainly hope that a cure is found. But also in the meantime, it's imperative that the people living with the condition aren't forgotten about. There's support packages out there for the ones living with the condition here and now, while a cure is being found. And Charlotte and I are very, very keen to point out a fantastic charity, the EPDA. I'm not sure if you've come across them before, European Parkinson's Disease Association. And we find that their ethos is second to none.
Yeah, no, they've been very helpful also for the survey that I'm running now. They've been sharing it on social media, and they seem to be doing a great job, really. As I said, in general, Parkinson's has such a keen community of advocates that we really should be looking at the Parkinson's community as a role model for other conditions. But there's a lot to learn from the Parkinson's community.
Fantastic. Well, thanks, Nick. Thanks for your time this morning. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you and find out about you.
I hope that, if you can just share and invite your members to fill in that the survey that I'm doing, it would be very helpful, because what we're trying to do at the moment is understand what sort of impact mood and feelings of control in everyday life can have in the way people with Parkinson's take their medications with Parkinson's. So we know that people who are more depressed tend not to adhere to medication regimes as much as other people. So they find it harder to take their medications. Always medications with Parkinson's, we know that there's so much that people have to go through when it comes to medication regimes. There's I don't know if you don't mind me asking, how many medications do you take daily?
In the morning, I've got 6 different tablets. Then lunchtime, I take 2. Mid-afternoon 2, evening time 2, and 8 o'clock 2. So
what, 20 almost?
Very close to that, yeah. Any more and I'll rattle like a box of Tic Tacs when I walk.
So you see, there's so much that people have to go through. And just imagine if someone is, 79, 80, alone, living alone, and has to go through all these medications every day. It's very hard. And if you add depression on top of that, it becomes even harder. And what we are trying to understand is whether the way people feel in control of their life on different aspects from a psychological standpoint, so for example, in control of their symptoms, in control of how well they can adapt to daily challenges and things like that, can have an impact on this relationship between depression and medication adherence. And because if it does, we know that there is some preliminary evidence about it, but if it does, then it means that us as psychologists can target those psychological aspects with an intervention. And by improving that, then we can improve both depression and medication adherence. So we can help people with Parkinson's take their medications better in the future. But that starts at the moment with this online survey. It's all about trying to understand how things are at the moment. It's a very short survey. It takes around 20 minutes on average to fill out. And so if you could share it, if there are people,
we'll certainly share. We'll certainly share that for you. One point I was keen to mention is one of the main bothersome symptoms for people with Parkinson's is sleep.
Yeah.
I personally went through a stage where I would almost survive on 2 hours of sleep a night. And then I'd be, because I physically could not get to sleep. I'd feel physically tired, the body's aching, wants rest, go to bed, 2 hours later, boom, wide awake. So, I used to watch documentaries or films and go back off to work, feel quite refreshed. One of the downsides of that is about once every 2 weeks, I went the opposite, where if I went to bed at 10 o'clock at night, say, I'd be asleep until 10 o'clock the following night. And my body movements weren't needed, so I wasn't woken by the urgency to pee or to go to the loo. But because I was asleep and nothing could wake me from that state, I'd miss out on a full day's medication. I'd get to 10 o'clock at night and think, oh, I've missed all my daytime tablets. And that went on for a good few years. Thankfully, DBS, since I've had DBS surgery, all of that's gone.
Okay, well, that is great.
It's been one major benefit of having the DBS. So.
No, absolutely. And lack of sleep has all sorts of psychological impact as well. It affects anxiety, it affects mood. And that's actually one of the things that is going to come up with the guidance. So we'll share the guidance with you as soon as it's published in the next few weeks. And one of the aspects that we found for Parkinson's is that cognitive behavioral therapy is effective, seems to be effective based on the evidence we have found for sleep problems.
Right.
So what people with Parkinson's can do is find a CBT therapist and go through some therapy for that, learn some strategies to improve their sleep, learn some sleep hygiene. Sleep hygiene is also very important, learning what can facilitate sleep and what doesn't. And we all tend to do lots of things that actually don't facilitate sleep without knowing it. For example, screens that we watch late at night, the backlight of screens is normally very blue because it makes the colors pop out, it makes the whites pop out. So there are nowadays settings for phones, for smartphones, for tablets or computers to make the light warmer late at night, which can improve sleep. Because a very blue light can actually tire your eyes, but it prevents you from falling asleep. So there's all sorts of adjustments that people can do. But yeah, as I said, it's going to come out with a guidance, and that can be used then to inform some decisions around psychological interventions in the future.
Fantastic. Well, I've taken up a fair bit of your time. And we genuinely appreciate it here at Parkinson's Concierge to get guests on who enjoy the chat. It's been fantastic. And please do keep us updated with the research that you do, and we'd be glad to share it with the community.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.